and I could take a break from this world. Running on a hamster wheel, but searching for something I can't feel.
Hello, and welcome to A Night in Presents the podcast. I'm Cece Miller. I'm also known as Sharice, and I am your host. That is my privilege that I get to sit here with this beautiful author, poetess, Adrienne Ijioma, also known as Just Von Rice. Sis, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. I'm so happy to be here with you. It's so exciting. I've been waiting for it.
Oh, me too. Me too. I keep that energy because I am excited to talk to you about all of the things. Our audience, writers, creatives, etc., they will be blown away by your history. I just took a look online and I went, wait, what? All of this?
What?
So, talk to us about how you got into writing, sis.
Oh my goodness. I don't know this. I don't know all the things that you read, but I just started writing when I was about 8. I was 8 years old at elementary school. And I said that the first poem that I wrote was called Bored to Death. And it was just a school assignment. And I'm walking to school. And I remembered, I'm like, oh, we had an assignment due today in my English.
On the
And
list.
I hadn't done it. And I saw the billboard on top of a building and it said Bored to Death. And by the time I got to school, I had this child that died in class because his teacher was bored. And that was my first poem. And I had to
I love it.
I said, Miss Phillips, this is not about you. It's not you. And I was 8.
You gave a disclaimer for the piece.
It's just what I thought of. But I thought it was stupid. And but it fulfilled the obligation and got my little grade and everything. And I threw it in the trash. And she took it out right next to my teacher's desk. And she took it out of the trash and entered me into a poetry contest and I won. So from that point on, I'm like, okay, let me try to do this.
Yes, good. We love a good teacher, a good enthusiast for her students. Thank you, Teach. All right, so that is the beginning of the writer, the poet. So has poem as a genre always been your favorite? Do you write prose?
Yes, but poetry has been my number one. Poetry has definitely been my number one. I say that without it, I don't know how I would have gotten through the teenage years, because this is like your purge. This is where it's like a diary. Everything that I think I've experienced has been written down. And so I do have some drama, some dark years, some things where, you're going through an experience in life. So that I'm very into supporting young people finding their thing. Like, what is it that, what is your talent? What is your interest? Because that is where you go when you're going through something.
Absolutely.
And so poetry was that for me.
Find your thing, young people. Find your thing.
Right. Find your spot.
I agree. I concur. That is absolute must. Even if you're an older person, if you haven't found your thing yet,
right.
Your thing. What are you waiting for? So sis, after 8th grade, what was the next published book or published poem that you were honored to write?
Oh my goodness. I don't remember the titles, but when I was in high school, my drama teacher had a poetry recital for me, because I used to write I wrote
for you.
Or just for me. I wrote throughout school, from elementary, middle school, high school. So when I got to high school, I used to share my work all the time. I used to write poetry for, classmates, just so they can turn in an assignment. And I was like selling them for $1, like, okay, I can write you a poem. Somebody's like, oh, write a poem for my mom. Oh, write a poem for my friend. And and tell me about them. And I just give them something. So that was me, trying to learn, but I never knew the names I never knew the styles of poetry, the poetry that I wrote. I would just write it.
So you
So
didn't necessarily have the formula
I
for
didn't.
poetry.
I
You
I
were
didn't
just
know
coming from the
anything.
heart
Whatever
and
whatever came out.
free
They
expression.
typically, they always rhymed when I was young. Every poem.
Okay.
I never went into any other style until I got older. Everything rhymed until I was like in the later teen years. Um, but she did a poetry in Black. It was for Black History Month. So it was a poetry in Black, um, a symphony. Yeah, it was a symphony in Black. That's what she called it. A
Okay.
symphony in Black. And my classmates were each assigned a poem. And so she would, she did the little, what do you call it, a billfold, I think, the program. She did the
Yes, yes,
program
yes, yes.
and put it in
The
beautiful
playbill or the
the play,
program.
yes.
Yes,
And she
yes.
tied them with ribbon and we hand delivered them
How
to different
sweet.
classrooms. We brought it home, gave it to my mom, my grandmother. I didn't appreciate the deepness of that until later. Like, wow, she really went
The
out for
investments, right?
me because that had never happened. And then we had a school recital where classes came in and listened to us recite my poetry. That was just,
How did you feel? Were you confident already?
I was scared to death.
Hey,
That's why I was like happy
confidence
that
doesn't mean not scared though, right?
yeah,
Did you
but
find yourself easing into it already at that younger age, or did you
oh, I was all
were you
into it.
paralyzed the whole time? Were you like
No, I was
zoned out?
nervous, but I was excited to share. Of course, now I can look back and I'm like, ew, like I don't like half of the things that I wrote, but I did revamp them. I updated them for my age, I guess.
Okay.
And some
So
of
the
them ended up
growth,
in my
right?
books.
We're
Yeah,
talking about the growth now. Very
yeah.
nice.
In
Very nice.
fact, a Cafe Rendezvous, one of my, I think that's my third poetry collection. A lot of my early poetry that I performed in high school is in there. Yeah, so that's cool.
That's
That's,
awesome. How many titles do you have right now?
I have 4. I really have 5, but I say I claim 4.
That's an interesting
A
story.
cafe rendezvous. Countenance cuts on me was my favorite, my number one, but now Countenance is Cafe Rendezvous and Poems on Twitter. And Poems on Twitter was because I was part of a writing group and we received poetry prompts. You'd get a photo and you had to write a poem for the photos. So after I had collected so many of them, I'm like, okay, let me try to learn how to publish. So I used that as my intro to learning how to format and how to set up the book and what you call it, typography and all these things, and get everything and my dedication page and my title page and all of it, just playing around with it to get a feel for what it was. It's trying not to, I wanted to go traditional, but I knew that was a longer route because most poetry books need a name after it in order for it to have popularity, so you really need to be out there. So I said, well, let me go my own route. So that's how I got into self-publishing.
I love it. So are all your titles self-published?
They all, except for the first one, I do have one, but it's still it's a vanity press still. My really first one was back in 1997, no, 2000, it was 2006. It was called I'm Not Angry, I'm Bitter, but that one was from a vanity press. But these new ones, the 4 that I've published since 2018, these are all self-published. Yes.
Do you find self-publishing to be more convenient or more economical, or what made you decide to go that route for sure with all the other titles?
Because I like the control that I can have over it. I want to design my own cover. I want to determine, which poems I'm going to put in there and what the feel is for it. And, I wanted my photo and I wanted to see something that I know that I did. And I just wanted to learn. You know, I just want to learn the process. And when I look at the amount of time it takes from getting that idea, presenting it to an agent, you know, doing the editing and the proofing, and they're going into a publishing house and all the different hands that it has to go through, and you're paying all these hands, everybody, even if I looked at it and everything was perfect and I changed one line, you know, it goes through a lot.
But again, right.
I wanted it to do it now. I wanted to do it now. And I just thought it was, for me, I like learning, and it doesn't matter what kind of learning. And I just wanted to know what the process was.
See, I love that. All of that is relatable. I think a lot of creatives run up against the fact that, you know, I don't want to be a starving artist. I want control of my content. I want to be able to decide what happens to this baby that
Right.
I'm birthing, this
Right.
art that I am creating from my soul. I want it to be in control of what happens to it. So I
And
think
how
a lot of our audience can relate to that.
yeah, when I was looking at, you know, the steps for traditional publishing, how things have changed from back in the day. Like,
Mhm.
this is something that I've wanted to do since I was probably in middle school.
Gotcha.
So, and the teacher that I said that did the poetry recital, she was always encouraging me and making sure I got my work copyrighted and everything. So I saw a little bit of what it was, and I would get the Writer's Digest every year, this giant book on how to
The
present
Writer's
to,
Digest.
yes, that Writer's Digest was like the Bible of literature. But in modern times, when I saw how much work they wanted the author themselves to invest in it, you are going to be marketing your work. You are going to be going around and setting yourself up and contacting libraries and places and venues to hold your. I said, well, if I'm doing all the work, I might as well get all the money.
That
So
part.
they've changed. It changed because before they handled like you write it, you have your manuscript, you send it in, and they do all the work, and that's why they got all the money, and you got your 10% and they took the rest. So if I'm going to do all the footwork in the 2000s, here is my bank account. This is the routing number. This is where you can send it.
That part.
because I'm doing the, so I said, well, let me just do all of it then. Let me learn how to do it all.
Learning. So let's dive backwards into that just a bit, because you brought up a good point. You brought up different influences, different those who encouraged you on this journey, right? There's the teacher in 8th grade, there's the teacher who's in high school, there's writers, judges. What are your other influences for being a writer?
Right now, the number one person is my grandmother. And when you ask me the next question on that, I'm going to get into that. But I think the feeling that I get is Maya. I like how she got into grit. You know, the way that Maya Angelou would write her works, it was unlike anybody. I remember though in elementary school reading Langston Hughes and Nikki Giovanni and all these different, right? I had all these different writers. I also like Emily Bloom. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I like you said, I do write not just poetry but prose too. So I had my authors that I grew up reading over and over and over again. But I like to think and hope that I've developed my own style.
Yeah, and keeping
And
integrity to that, no doubt, has a lot to do with why you self-publish as well, so that you don't have unnecessary influence, right? How do you
changes.
avoid? I think that's the easiest way to avoid unnecessary influence and have the integrity in your work stay what
Yeah.
you want, remain what
Let
you.
let me tell you something. Back in elementary school, there was a teacher, and it wasn't Miss Phillips. I had Miss Phillips and Miss Williams, but it was one of them. It had to be Miss Phillips because Miss Williams never would. She's the one that was, put my poetry in the contest. But some teacher in elementary school we had to write a poem and use particular vocabulary words.
Yeah.
And I remember having to put this poem together. I can see it in my mind. You had to draw like a scene.
Right.
But I remember specifically, I used the word entranced. It will entrance you.
Mm-hmm.
And she came to me and said, I don't understand. What do you mean entrance? I said, it's not entrance. It's a verb, entrance. And she told me, no, I needed to change it because people wouldn't understand. I said, it will entrance you. What don't you understand about that? So in one of my poems, in my book, Cuts on Me, I referenced that someone tried to take my work and change it because I'm too young to know what that word is. So if she didn't know it, I couldn't know it. If you don't understand it, then I don't understand it. So that word was too big for me.
And that's an
And
indelible
that's
mark
what I
on you.
remembered. That's what I
That
remember.
is an indelible mark. Is
That's
that
fifth
where the
grade.
title Cuts on Me comes from? Is the book about a collection of poetry of those things that are indelible and now part of your experience, your human experience, your core?
It wasn't directly that, but it was hurts. Cuts
Right.
on Me is about pain.
Okay.
It was about the hurts that I experienced as a younger person, and just the revelation or realization one day of how or why I am who I am.
Yeah.
And like my opening poem, like here I am sitting here, I'm at home, I have on my blouse, but I have on this long jacket, right? I sort of did like a self-reflection, and I realized, I said, I'm always covered up. It's just a habit. But where did it come from? So my first poem, it says, I've always worn sweaters in the summertime, no matter if sky is cloudy or full of shine. And I had to look back like, why? And it was because of the hurts, the cuts, the things that happen that mess with your psyche, that mess with your mind. I was protecting myself subconsciously. Like, don't look at me, don't mess with me. So it had a lot to do with sexual assault, molestation, or the threat of, and then looking at how women are treated, how in one of the poems I talk about the same men who lived on my street, as I walked past them as a kid, they're telling me, be careful, don't talk to strangers, make sure you get home. And they're watching to make sure I'm safe until I hit puberty. And then it's like, hey, gal, when you gonna marry me? Hey, why don't you come over here so I can talk to you? I'm like, aren't you the same people who were protecting me and looking out for me?
Mm-hmm.
But you changed, you turned into something else when, as my poem says, that's how it goes when blood flows.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hit puberty and things change and your body start changing shape, I said, men start silly grinning and bold approaching, wanting more than just a simple high. I wonder why. What did I do? And so here I am, or when I wrote that book, I'm 48 or so, and I'm still wearing sweaters in the summertime. So I've carried this from 12 years old when things were happening to 30 years later. I'm still, and now that's my comfort zone. Like, I'm not complete. I don't care if sweat rolling down my back. I wear it. And I'm not comfortable with my arms exposed. I'm always, trying to do this, cover it up.
And I think that's the beauty of poetry too, though. You spoke about a moment ago, those drivers for what comes out of your pen, right? The catalysts.
Right.
And these things are so profoundly human, unfortunately, in this system, that's going to resonate with so many young women. That's going to resonate, and they need that expression to say, by myself. not alone. This is not
Mhm.
uncommon, as the scripture says. This is common to men, and
Absolutely.
somebody else went through it, and I'm not
Absolutely.
invisible here. By
And
the
they are
reading of that
more
type of poem,
than not.
they're gonna find a kindred spirit
You,
that they can,
mhm,
oh, okay,
right.
I'm
I'm glad
I'm
she said it, you know.
suffering
I'm
alone.
glad she said it, you know, so I don't have, you know,
Somebody else said it for me, and they were my voice. And yes, absolutely,
that's how I
absolutely, that's so
connected with
important.
so many. I connected with so many women
Mhm.
who told me in private, my sisters, like,
I'm sure.
that happened to me. That's me too. That's me too. So in my writing, when I get into deep subjects, even with cuts on me with countenance, I start off with purge. You know,
Oh,
I try to explain it as I'm going through.
okay.
I give sort of like um, the word escapes me, a prelude, I guess I want to say. It's another word, but that's not the one I want, but it's going to work. So I try to give you a story up front before I get into some poetry.
So you preface each poem with a
Yes.
behind the
No,
bars,
just a
or
section,
just that
like a
section?
section,
Okay.
section. And then I get into the when you, because you'll start seeing how my poetry changes. So that's what my control was. I wanted to draw a theme, like, okay, this is what we experience, this is what we go through, but we can't stay in there. Now I got to start changing. I had those experiences, it made me angry. So then I have all the anger, all my frustration. So this is how, you know, men treat us, this is how women dress, and this is what's going on. And then in the end, I said, but I found myself. So then I had to be uplifting. So by the time you get to the end, you're going through that journey. You know, I
Right.
get into spirituality and things that are ridiculous in the world. But in the end, it's like I didn't see it coming. My heart jumping and thumping like a drum in the middle of a musical score. So I find myself, you know, so I get more excited. And in the end, I'm like, I'm good.
I
So
love it.
that I don't carry that anymore. And that's where that was my opening to, okay, I'm gonna keep doing this self-publishing because I like this. It's my pace. You know, I don't have deadlines. I set them for myself. I write, I'm learning. I started studying the styles of poetry is 40, I think. So that is, I'm not gonna jump in there. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'm gonna hold it. I'm gonna hold it till you ask it.
So, okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So you have 4 books, and as you started to educate yourself more on the structure,
Right,
the formula.
right,
Talk to
right.
me about what that looked like for you. Did you educate yourself?
Haikus, iambic pentameter. Um,
Yes.
I have a list. I wrote this list and some of them here, the minutes, Kyriel, limericks, odes, octels, nonsense. I didn't know any of these rondeau. Is it rondeau or rondeau? Rondeau. I didn't know the names
When
of
I'll take
these.
your word for it, sis.
The ABAB.
Yes.
There's the ABBAAB. I'm like, there's so many. There's 40 different four.
We're
Abecedarian
talking about rhythmic poetry. We're talking about um, as defined as poetry. There are so many ways to create
ballads. Yes,
the
yes.
imagery and the connection through this particular art form. Is that what drew you to poetry? Why so many poetic books as opposed to, you also write prose, but poetry
Mhm.
seems to be your favorite.
Every year there is, if you know about NaNoWriMo,
Mm-hmm.
every year in November is National Novel Writing Month.
Okay.
So it's a time, like internationally, it's National Novel Writing Month. And every year I would endeavor to work on a manuscript. So the challenge was 50,000 words in 30 days. It was
Wow.
always a challenge.
Very nice.
Every November, I got into it with the best of intentions and
Mm-hmm.
always came out with a book of poetry. It's like, I could
This is
not,
what we doing. The poetry came out. This is what we doing.
this is what we're doing. So now I'm about at 32 to 35 manuscripts. We call them WIPs, works in progress.
Yes.
Some have been in progress for 5 years
Okay.
or more or less. Some are brand new. I would get inspired. I got great ideas and I start writing on them. And suddenly I wrote a poem. And
Suddenly
then
wrote
I
a
got an
poem.
idea. So then another book came out. And it just happened like that every time. So every time I wrote one of these, it was because it typically started in November. So my current one did not start in November. It might have. I'm not sure. Maybe it
So
did.
this November past 2021, you
Yeah.
started a new one.
Yes. Did I start that in November? I believe I did.
And then what happened? A poem?
I'm working on a new book. Yeah.
And we love it.
I was
We love
confident
it.
this time. I'm like, this time I'm going to do it.
Stick
So
to it.
I
Pros.
I even got an illustrator and I have illustrations for the
Nice.
book. And I end up going over there. And
The
now
poetry calls. The poetry
so
calls.
that is lifelong. As far back as I remember being able to write and understand rhyme.
That's
So
beautiful.
that was like third grade. That was in my mind. 8 years old, third grade. That's where I started learning, first line, third line, second line, fourth line. They always rhyme, or do it all and then the last line and each stanza. And so I started learning then how powerful the written word is and how it affects, how I feel. And it can change the way I feel. In order for me to feel better, I got to get it out. So whatever's going on, sometimes you know how it's working, like you have this thought and it's in there and you pent up and it's in there and it can go days or it can go weeks and something finally and then boom.
Releases. Yes, releases.
And now you feel better and you can go on with life. I'm like, okay,
That
I
part.
got that out.
The release is good for you, but it's also good for the audience. It's good for them to witness your release. Sometimes that's the only way people can. Everybody is not given the same gift, right?
Exactly.
And so if poetry is a gift and the poetry is calling you, as it seems to be, because we are now 4 books later that are poetic, hey, somebody is benefiting from that and loving that. So you talked about the young people that you wanted to benefit from hearing your experiences. You talked about that a little bit earlier. Let's dive into that a little bit. How do you find your books landing on your audience? Are you getting that feedback?
Like where it is because I am on Facebook a lot and I'm on Instagram, and that's like I have I was in writing groups. I'm on in writing groups in Facebook, but often it is just me reading something and connecting with somebody. You scroll and you see something, and then I can respond to somebody else's post, or there's a situation that's going on and I'm like, oh, that affects me, that touches me so much. And all these people are all talking about it. We have shared experiences. We know we've been through the same thing. And I want to say something that is helpful. What can I say that's helpful or that makes them feel better or is encouraging or something? And sometimes I'll write something just to pop into the post just so I can say I understand, what you're going through. So I read a lot. I get distracted a lot when I'm trying to work on things and I read something and it takes you all off and you read another.
Hey, that's the R&D department for the writer.
Research and development, for real.
That is research and development. Engineers, mathematicians, they have R&D. Our R&D, we can't call it a distraction. That's research. That's research.
Right. But
there's levels to this. There's phases and progress, right? So I think to be a good writer, it's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but I can't credit myself with it. To be a good writer, you have to be a good reader.
That's right.
If you're not willing to accept the input and to at least deliberate on a thought outside your own, You're probably an okay writer, but it might be
I
better.
I I don't know when, because you asked me about the confidence and when I
Yeah.
really got it. I always wrote for me. I didn't care what anybody else thought about it, when I was young. Um, Only when I first considered, okay, I'm ready. I think I'm ready to start publishing. What am I going to say
Hmm.
that someone else is going to care about?
Okay.
But instead of me thinking so much about that, I was working on me, getting
Okay.
out whatever I needed to get out. And when you're honest about that, that is when your audience finds you. Because by sharing, what happened, reality
The
and
candor.
experiences, yeah, being
Yes.
truthful, being frank, because I'm always an open book. Like I don't think I'm over, I try not to overshare, but I am an open book. Like if you've been through something, I'm like, okay, I've been through that too, and this is what happened. So people tell me that I need to pull back on some things, but I think that that's how you connect with people. Because if you put up this shield, like everything is fine, everything is perfect all the time, then nobody can relate to you. Because like you do not like me, you're not real. Everything is wonderful and perfect in your world. But when I tell you this is the dirt and this is the grit and this is the experience, oh, now we have a conversation
That's such
because
an
now
interesting point.
you're
That
sharing.
is a really interesting point because isn't that what the poetry is about? The
It's
publishing of
about
poetry is about the
right.
conversation that is I'm gonna start that over because there's a large engine noise in the background. Okay. Isn't that what poetry is about? It's about the conversation that it sparks. It's about that emotional connection, the
Mhm,
network of humanity
mhm,
coming together to understand one another with a little bit more compassion,
right, right.
maybe a little anger, even whatever you're
It's
feeling, though, you're
life. The
connecting.
world needs
Yes,
poetry.
yes, you're
It
connecting.
we have
It's such
to.
a beautiful art form. I want to say that, yes, indeed. The June 8th, 2001 Awake on page 20 through 22 makes
Mhm.
this beautiful statement. I had to look it up because I wanted to include this. In order to create the desired effects, poets select their words the way a jeweler selects his stones.
Hmm. Ooh, June 8th, 2001.
June
Ooh,
8th,
I
2001.
like that.
That is what
Awake.
the writers
Ooh. And
will
that's so true.
describe about poetry.
It's
And
true.
think that what you've done with your jewels is
Wow.
amazing. So let's
I
get
got
into
it.
your jewels. Let's get into them, okay? So I have asked Sister Adrienne Ijioma Jess Bond Wrights to perform for us three of her pieces. Give us a little behind the bars on them. So I'm gonna spotlight her now. Let her have the virtual stage.
Okay. Wow. So I'm going to go back with something old. It's called Mirror.
One
And-
second, sis. I'm sorry, it's not letting me
Okay.
spotlight. I guess I have to pin you. There we go.
Okay.
So you said you're going to start us off with Mirror.
Mirror. Yes. And just get into it. Just go in.
Do it. Let's hear it, sis.
Okay. The next time I look in the mirror, I'm just going to try to see me, not some superficial image of who they want me to be. If my eyes are deep dark brown, that's what my mama gave me. And if my lips are kind of full, well, that's just how my daddy made me. Generations of our women have had some hips as wide as mine. And we're known for being a bit heavy up top, but hey, a cup this full takes time. Lean back and see. I can feel some jeans, but it ain't all about form and face because the love in my heart is also oversized. And with my voice, I take up space. I don't need to pose nude for you to notice me or have my face on your magazine. Because when the going gets tough, people count on me. And as a friend, I reign supreme. Go on, keep your awards. Among true friends, I'm adored. I'm not in awe just because you play ball, you bump and grind on the stage, act out a scene, turn the page. My reputation never fades at all. Popping pills, making deals, sitting high on the hill, imagining others will envy you for that. But when your 15 minutes are done, I'm still alert and still strong. And at the end of the day, my dignity is still intact. So when we take a moment to reflect, what's more important than self-respect and staying clean in this degraded, immoral society? So no matter what road you choose, I don't need to be in the news. I just want to look in the mirror and be able to see me. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Beautiful, beautifully done, beautifully spoken. The
And it's just
writing.
imagery. It's just what people, and this again, you talked about what people, I mean, what we can share and how you want to reach somebody. This is about self-image. And I don't need to be on this magazine. I don't need to be a size 0. I don't need to have all the implants and all the things to love and dignify myself.
And it is a call to action to love and dignify the self, right? I love
So-
that. That is a big and profound point. Like,
Yeah.
especially with COVID, I feel like, and maybe you agree, you let me know, especially with COVID, with people being locked down, some alone, others with the mirror of their family, right?
Mm.
They've discovered some things about how they identify self.
Right.
How would you say? Would you
It's
agree with
been
that?
a lot of time to be in the house with yourself. And where did I hear this before? About how many people are afraid to be alone with themselves. They said when you walk into a room or you're sitting somewhere alone, what do people do? They got to turn on the radio. They have to turn on the TV. You know, they want to get on the phone or call somebody or play. They can't just sit and be
To
quiet.
sit with themselves is a lot to ask, right?
And
But yeah, that's so
this is the
important.
time.
And not to have the air around you
Other people's
create your
opinion. Yep.
identity.
Right.
Right? That's
So
big.
COVID, like you said, it really, I mean, people didn't have that audience. They didn't have anywhere. So a lot changed. But for me, it gave me more time to, I guess, uncover and discover things maybe that, you know, when you have family, you put family first. And it
Especially
says
as a
somewhere in
especially as a woman. Yeah.
you lose your identity. And I think I was already going through that before COVID, but it
Okay.
gave me an opportunity to say, this is an integral part of my life. It has always been. It has always been. As far back as I understood me and knew myself as a person, this person has always written poetry. I tried maybe 16, 17 years old. I was doing plays. I tried to write plays. We performed one of my plays too in high school. I had drama, so in drama we did all that. But this is how I express myself and how I open up and like peel back all the layers and tell you the real thing. Anything that I'm going through will come out in a poem, you know, and that's how I deal with life.
And
I think
it
that's good to
really
share
lends
with people.
itself to what you just, that piece that you just shared with us helps us to really appreciate that the concept of something that may be difficult for someone to articulate. But in poetry, it's simplicity, the rhyme, the verse, the rhythm. It gives it a life and a body and a vehicle that people can, that's palatable. People can swallow it and really understand and start to process that,
Mhm.
right? So your next piece, what's that title?
It's called Apologize.
Apologize. Let me ping you and we'll get right into apology.
Let's get right down to it. When Anita Baker apologized, she knew she was wrong, having said things she never meant to say. but I don't feel that way. When you shout and scream, we both know what you mean. And though you try to deny and say that you care, I still feel scared. And you know it's unfair to treat your baby that way. So when it comes to regret, I'm not feeling it yet. Everything I said, I meant. Hello? So now we want to talk about sorry? Hello? Hello? No. Just like Adele, I yelled all the way from the other side. And I even tried to act like your cutting words didn't matter anymore. But you broke my heart. Your anger tore me apart. And the space between us now might as well be a million miles. And honestly, with everything about to crash, we don't need to rehash the he said, she said of the past. I got over that fast. And I'll get over you. Oh, yeah, I can be cliche all day. Go ahead and do you, boo. You heard Justin say, what goes around, what comes around goes around. And I got that feeling in my bones. That seems to be how this will all play out. So go on now. Cry me a river. Thank you.
Yes,
Woo!
beautiful, beautiful. Cry me a river.
So
What
was
was the behind the bars on that? What sparked that poem?
I think I was listening to the radio at the time, and I was trying to think of my favorite singers. So I had Anita Baker, I had Adele, and I had Justin Timberlake. This collection was really personal. I had a friend that was going through hard times in her marriage, and it was the second time. And just listening to her when I thought everything was wonderful and we hadn't talked in a while, and I was so happy for her and all these things. And then we talked and I found, I'm like, what? And everything crashed. And I'm like, what happened? And I said, that's not rare. Like it's work. It takes work. But when sometimes you might be deceived about what you think you have.
Reality of it, right?
Yes.
The reality.
So this was the situation when someone was a little narcissistic, you know, and I use the word gaslighting when making you believe that you're the one that's wrong.
Yeah.
And so the apology isn't real.
Unfortunately, there's such a commonality these days in the last days that it kind of helps you to appreciate what the situation was like with Lot, with Noah, right? Because that ego, that self first kind of attitude has resurfaced as should we say the inspiration for a lot of music and poetry these days.
Very,
right?
very true.
So
Ooh.
thank you for covering that.
Yes, yesterday
Yeah.
was something I participated in, and it was so deep. The mood just went, woo, that was heavy. It was heavy.
There was an event. Is that what you said? An event yesterday?
Yes. And I think at that point I was like, I need to go take a nap. I need to go rest because it was.
Yeah, and won't
so
it
heavy.
do that to if you are in a poetry event and you don't feel like your emotions have actually exacted a toll on you physically? You weren't watching, you weren't listening.
I had to reach out to the person that had shared the last one because I mean it messed with me so. I was done at that point. I'm like, okay, I'm done at right here.
Doesn't that impress upon you why?
Hear nothing else after this. Like that's where I was right now. I'm done right there. And I reached out. I was like, you shook my core.
I think that was the point that was the point that Jehovah was making when in the book of Lamentations he decided that should be a poem. That should be a poem when this 119th psalm is written and recorded for us. And Jehovah said, yeah,
I want to meet some of these people that wrote these words. I cannot wait. That's like what is your hope for the resurrection? I want to sit with the poets.
Yes.
I want to sit with the poets.
When you read most of the Hebrew scriptures and come to realize this rhythm, the parallelism, you're absolutely right. That
I'm
is
impressed
poetry.
with Job saying, I repent in dust and ashes. I'm like, I love that phrase.
A lot of the book of
Love that
Job,
phrase.
poetry, yes. The poetry of the prophets when they get to discussing Jehovah's judgment, the poetry of Huldah and the poetry of Deborah, it's amazing to see that our God is employing this. Why? Because for the same reason that you felt like that after that piece, it's supposed to move you.
It does.
We're
Yeah,
supposed
exactly.
to be moved,
Right.
right? So tell us what next moving piece you're going to share with us, sis.
So let me get it here. It is, I Thought I Knew You.
Let's go.
And I'm going to try to do this because I'm going to scroll down my screen here. Okay. I thought I knew you. I thought I knew you, but I didn't know the half. Everything you made was perfection. Your tender compassion and willingness to forgive, to only see the good in your children as they went off on their way, neglecting and dismissing your counsel. Because as kids, don't we all think we know everything? And you, being like Ancient of Days, were outdated, not hip with the times, oblivious to the struggle. Yes, I thought I knew you, but I didn't know the half. That you cried my tears, you ached in my fears, you rejoiced in my praise, you considering me, you, my Ancient of Days. How I wish you were flesh and blood right now, that I could melt in your arms and feel safe in your care. And you could even rock me to sleep just by the melody of your gentle soul. I will never again consider you old, outdated, antiquated, not up to the times, can't relate it. You did not receive your due glory, but I'm here now to tell your story. I can recount your sacrifice, your sage advice, your endurance and hope. How you saw us in adversity and gave us means to cope. Doors always open, table laden with food. No man was a stranger, always seeing the good. And when you found us near danger, you boldly gave warning. But blinded by pursuits we thought were sunshine, you knew it was stormy. Sheltered by your confidence that all would work out fine, guided by your principles and your precious gifts divine. Yes, I thought I knew you, but the realization is I never did. And I can't take all the blame nor make the excuse that I was just a kid, because you knew for yourself that I was a smart one, admitted and true and owned. I never gave up believing, even when I was grown, that you'd have time to take it easy, enjoy your season of rest, to look back on your labors knowing you gave us your best. You never begged or forced anyone to give you a call. I will tell them on which pedestal I stood you, deserving it all. I will write your name on pages beyond my beginning and end. How you shone the light for me. Now it's my turn to defend. How you wrote it all down in all your book and left the roadmap on our behalf. So those like me who found it and thought they knew you, they would learn they didn't know the half. Thank you.
Yes, sis. Thank you. Thank you. So listen, what was the inspiration? Let's start there because that piece sounds like somebody I know very well.
And this is where the play comes in too. This was a match between Jehovah and my grandmother.
Oh, I
Because
love that.
it was everything that I said is that I thought I knew her. And she died in 2020. And my uncle sent me her journals. And I've been reading these journals. And I'm like,
I didn't know.
I told my mom, I said, my grandmother was old since I knew her. So I saw her as an old woman. That's like your grandmother. She grandmother age. But in reading and finding out, like, okay, she has her own thoughts and her own interests, and she has focus, and she went to school and she studied this. I'm like, she went to college. I'm like, she did thing. Like, I got to see her personality. I said, I thought I knew you. And with the table laid out, like my grandmother's house, when you went to my grandmother's house, you go straight in that dining room. There's guaranteed it's going to be a 7-Up cake, a German chocolate cake, or just what else did she would make? She would make a coconut cake. Like, those are standards. It's always made. It's always there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You got that. And if somebody's coming over and she wants to make a meal, it's going to be end-to-end spread. In the same vein, that's how Jehovah is. He lays his table out for us like that. No one is a stranger. So he's always available. He wrote down the guidelines in his book for us to find that roadmap. My grandmother did the same for me in speaking about life and things that you go through, your ups and downs. And she wrote these all in her journals because she wanted us to read it. And she had ideas of being published one day. So there was
Did you inherit that then? Did you inherit that?
That's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing.
Look at
Look
that.
at her. I'm like, I didn't know. I did not know that my grandmother wrote anything.
That is such a beautiful story. And I have to tell you, the minute that you started talking about this, I remembered an awake from October 2009. Okay. And it was the title of it was, let me find it. Young people ask, how can I get to know my parents better? Let me tell you why it came to me, because it talked about the benefits of getting to know your parents better. And of course, if your grandparents are alive, of course, do that. But here is one that so very specifically speaks to this experience. Benefit number 2 is that you'll gain insight into your parents' point of view. But benefit number 3, you may become more comfortable talking about your own life. Benefit, or you might learn something. These 2 benefits are the reason we write. It's something you experienced in reading the writing of your grandmother. And Jehovah's Word is never false. We know that. But when you see it demonstrated and you become witness to it and you go, yeah, that's exactly what happened. It's that much more real. The fact that your grandmother had this in her DNA, the fact that whatever she had in her DNA came through, and here you were writing, oh, how proud she's gonna be when you get to when she is resurrected and you get to resume that relationship.
I cannot wait. She was 96. She had been. She started studying at 85.
Oh.
And from 85 until 87.
Yeah.
But then my grandfather died, and she was moved from her home and lost connection.
So she wouldn't be alone. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
leave that there.
Stuff.
We'll leave that there.
But in her journals, she mentions the sister Constance. She's like, oh, Mona came, and I'm so glad. I needed that. She mentions her in different days, and she's got her little date, Thursday, November, whatever. And she wrote whatever happened that day. If somebody came to visit, she wrote it. If somebody brought her food, oh, so-and-so brought me 16 apples and 2 carrots. And she listed everything. And at first, I'm like, what is this? She like wrote down everything. If she, drink water, she wrote it up. But as I'm going through it, I said, this is revealing who she is and what she cares about. And all through it, she talking about family. She talked about her grandkids came. Adrienne called me. Adrienne sent me flowers, and Adrienne said
And
this.
how did that make you feel to read that? Right, right. Listen, it is the human nature that we need to be heard. We need to be seen. You felt heard and seen as she was feeling heard and seen and writing about it, and you're reading about it later.
And just the appreciation. And she
It doesn't get
always
more
had that.
human.
Like if you brought her a flower out of her own garden, she would appreciate. She had appreciation. You know, my grandmother was awesome, and
Sounds
I am
like
so
it.
looking forward to seeing her, because she started calling Jehovah by his name, and that was significant. She took down the Last Supper off of her wall, you know, so just to let her know, hi, you on earth.
Yes, to be there to receive
You're
her will
right
be
here.
such a blessing. And when you're there to receive her, you can say, you know what? I think you'll
I read
appreciate
your
this.
books.
I read
Yes.
your books, and I
So
wrote a
that,
few of my own. In
yes,
fact, let me
yes,
share that with our audience. I'm going to
yes.
share screen now so that they can see what you have going on here, madame.
Okay.
Listen, you guys,
Wow.
Amazon.com. Search the author, Adrienne and Ijioma. There is Cuts on Me, the Kindle
Yeah.
edition,
Yeah.
Countenance, the Kindle edition.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So we got
I
Kindle
am
paperback. Cuts on Me is on the only one on audio, but I'm working slowly on Countenance because I want that one on audio as well.
This is awesome. And you guys, Cafe Rendezvous, listen, look at this. Check out the titles, check out the books, go ahead and purchase them. I mean, goodness, guys. And then leave a review for our sister. Leave
Oh,
a
I
review and let her
appreciate that.
know what you think.
Absolutely, I'd appreciate that.
Okay. I'm going to share now because I want to come back and talk to you just a little bit more. What's on the table? What is on the works in progress table, the workshop? What are we busting out now? I know you said November lent itself to a new book.
Yes. So this is regarding my grandmother, like I said. I started from reading, and it was before I started reading her journals. I have a friend that's an artist in Ohio, and she's like a Picasso-esque. Her work, her name is online, she's Half Elements.
Okay.
And it's like she takes all this paint and it just looks like it explodes on this page. But the styles and the designs and things is just, I'm like, how are you here? And nobody knows. So I'm like, I've been trying to push her in what she does. But in looking at her pictures one day, I saw one. And it's like gives you an idea of an African woman, and she has this turban on her head. It's all these different colors, and her head is like bowed down, looking down. And I love the silhouette of her. And I'm like, that would be beautiful for a cover. And so with seeing that, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking African. And so I'm thinking about Black people. And then I'm thinking, my grandmother's significance, what historical, like drawing from the past and bringing to the present, what did she experience and go through? My mom talks about the water fountains, for colored and for white, and how she was one day, she's like, I'm walking up to the water fountain. My grandma was like, she better not go touch that water fountain. She's like, I'm going to drink out that fountain. She said the people in the dime store were looking in the window, just waiting for her to do it. And she said, I went up there and I pushed it and everything, and her friend came and grabbed her and pulled her back. And she said, if not, she said, I would have drank from it. So I started thinking about these things, and color, skin, everything always comes back to skin, and how it has affected a whole culture of people.
Absolutely. The fact that that is even something that is something
Has
that
to be talked about, right?
experienced. It has to
Right.
be talked about because it was an experience that shapes so much that there are people who have the privilege not to know that experience,
Right.
to have the privilege not to be set apart from basic functions, basic freedoms, and not just freedom to drink from the waterfall, but the freedom that it represented. It represented that privilege that you to ask which one you were going to drink from. You didn't need to care about that. That wasn't something that struck fear in you.
Yeah.
It struck no because you were completely unbothered as you moved through the world. Well, there were an entire set of people who were bothered by every movement, every movement, like a balloon in a field of cacti.
What did she tell me? My mom told me that my grandmother, I forgot it was in Birmingham, was it in Birmingham or Pineapple, Alabama? I think it's Birmingham. She said she was the first Black person that ever worked at a in one of those, I guess you want to call it
a department store?
Yeah, thank you. When I'm thinking about the counter, like she was a counter girl, where you know they had the sodas and all that stuff, and
like a Woolworths kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of feel. Yes. But just thinking about that and how lighter complected people relate to just the whole Black
different
person experience, the whole experience. And I wanted to just talk about some of the things that she experienced and went through, but also what women go through, and then Black women go through, and then bring it up modern day. So I'm working my way through it. At the same time, I'm trying to write one poem in every poetic style.
Oh, a challenge.
Yes. So that's my challenge. So I've done probably like 15 so far, and they're in alphabetical order.
How often do you challenge yourself like this? Does each book have that kind of challenge?
No.
Okay, so this is new.
In the past, like Countenance, it was all about relationships and things gone wrong. Countenance was about the skeletons that you bring from the past and how it affects your life. Cafe Rendezvous, it was the backtrack to high school poetry, but it was about romanticism and love. A Cafe Rendezvous, because it's one poem. A Cafe Mirage there's a poem in there called Cafe Mirage. So I just brought that back. And then Poems on Twitter was just random fun, like random whatever. So this was because I started reading about the styles of poetry and found out, oh, I write that. Oh, I know that. Or I've never heard of that. Yeah. So I wanted to know what they each were. And as I did, I'm like, oh, so these are things that I've been doing my whole life and I never knew what they were called. And I want to have that literacy. I want to be able to know that I know what is it, ABCDarian. I want to know what that is, that you're writing a poem and the first line is from A to Z. So each line of the poem is one of the letters of the alphabet. It has to start that way. And the meter and syllables, there's poetry like iambic pentameter. I think that's the one. There's 10 syllables each line. There's so many.
Or the haiku. Do you have haiku?
Yes, I did it. And then I even was able to combine styles.
Okay.
So I have some that I'm like, I wrote iambic pentameter, but as Kyrielle. These things are intense.
Yes.
Like you have to match syllables, and then you have to make the first two lines rhyme with the last line, and it has to be the same in each stand. So it's a lot of jumping through hoops. So that's the challenge. Like I want to do this.
One thing that you brought up that just really hit me, that I want to mention to our audience. The more that you create, the closer it draws you to our Father, because it reminds you that we're made in his image. Everybody knows Jehovah's an awesome engineer, mathematicians know it. We see it, right? We understand fractal, design. We understand that there's the cochlear shell, the conch shell, excuse me, the pine, etc. If you watch jw.org design videos, you see evidence that he is a mathematician and a scientist and an engineer. Yes, and he is an artist.
Denied.
He is an artist, and you see it in the sunset and etc. But in his word, you see he is a, and when you see Jehovah apply parallelism in the Hebrew verse, when you see the acrostic poems that are in the Bible, see him apply math on art in a way that makes you say, I want to do it, Daddy. I want to try. Father, let me try.
Exactly.
And you just have to get in it. And once you explore that, it opens up an entire room for you of things that you just have to try. It draws you so close, and you can understand a little fraction of the relationship that he had with his son as they're creating things, right? That's one of the beautiful things about poetry. How do you feel when you are in the zone of writing, sis?
Oh, that's a good question. When I can, like for instance, with these that I'm working on for this, and the title is "As Is the Sky," and there's a poem in there, and that's one of the lines. And I'll hopefully I'll get to it because I think it might be, it's not the haiku, but it's one of the smaller poems there. When I'm working on trying to accomplish one of these, and you have to get the syllables right. So what words can I use? And you thinking like, okay, and you got to scratch out and you got to change because it has to be right. And I'm like, whispering in the wind, carry, and I got to get it right because it can only be 8 syllables. So how can I make that line make sense? And then connect the next one and the next one. So when you do it, I'm just like, so it's exciting. Because I'm like, I'm doing it, I'm learning, but I'm doing it.
Also,
so it's not.
Can you talk to us about the excitement, yes, of that you met that challenge, but one of that same awake I mentioned earlier, the June, it talked about the compact nature of emotion in a poem. You are condensing the emotion into those 8 syllables. How does that feel?
You have to get it just right. And you know how we write, and then you can leave it and come back and like, is something not, or, I gotta like changing the words. Like I had one, and I think I said something about this one, whisperings and wind carry tales of tragedy from the lightning storm. And before I had something about, from the, it wasn't tornado, it was something, but it didn't work. It was some other word. And I'm like, what kind of storm? What would, lightning, like whisperings and wind. Like think about when there's a lightning storm and afterwards, like everybody is just like what just happened? And the whisperings and the wind is like the tragedy that's left behind. What's happened after the storm is what you see torn apart and laid on the ground, and people got to pick up pieces. I'm like, oh, so I called that aftermath. And I'm like,
and this is,
that's so powerful.
As the sky is?
As is the sky.
As is the
sky. Let me see
if I can inspirational.
Oh, and I'm completely excited. So let me see, what was this? The title is, so it's called a cinquain. Cinquains it has 5 lines. The first one is 2 syllables, second 4, third 6, the fourth 8, and then back to 2. Yes. So I had to get these syllables down, and I think there's something else involved in there. It's 5 lines, and I don't know what else you had to do. So I wrote, as is the sky. We are, as is the sky, a beautiful color. Shades unique as the stars by night shine bright. That's it. So we all are, like, everybody is a different shade. There's nobody that's just blank. There's no white and black. We're all shades. We're as different as there are stars in the sky.
Yes.
Each of us, unique like that. And we're all beautiful. And so that was the beginning of As Is the Sky, because it's talking about a little bit about, not directly about color, but that's the influence about this experience because of,
Mm.
and then a little bit about women and different things in there. So
So you know what I love about your writing is that you cover so many different feelings. But you kind of concentrate your focus on the experience of you, of a Black woman, of a woman, of
I noticed that too.
and no.
It wasn't
think
intentional, but it happens. Yeah.
I think that from that comes some of the best work when you focus on things that you can actually put teeth behind because you did get
Been there. I've
did
been
the
there.
fighting, right?
Right.
And it hits your audience in a way that, like, they know you have authority in this speech that you're giving. They know that you've been there, right? And then there's credibility, there's integrity to it, like we talked about. So you cover emotions that are full range, a full spectrum. You met the challenge, you went and got a challenge and said challenge accepted. And you are doing that with your new book that we look forward to seeing on Amazon. How soon is that going to happen?
I am focused on June. So my grandmother died in June
Targeting for
2020.
June.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I'm trying to make sure that it's going to be complete.
homage to grandma. Yes, homage to grandmother. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you
And
so
so this
much.
it's going to be so serious. I'm like, I think this is going to be my greatest official, because I write in free verse quite often. And I didn't know that I was writing in styles because I just write whatever I feel. And then I found out, oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. But this one is on purpose. The whole thing is on purpose. So I'm excited, and I feel with the background story of having trying to give a tribute to my grandmother, because my previous book that I wrote, because I don't think I wrote anything. I didn't publish anything last year, I don't think. I had ordered a set of my books to give to my grandmother. The day that it arrived is the day that I found out she died.
Oh, my heart.
So I'm like, I wanted to show her. I'm like, I did it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm trying to go to. June 8th is my target.
So even if the page doesn't survive Armageddon, you know what will? Your recollection as it returns to you. And you can tell her, or you can rewrite them, and you can say, here's what I had done.
Right.
And that, oh, that's amazing. That's
I learned about you, I got to see you. Yeah. I got to see her as a young woman.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'd never even seen pictures of her as a young woman.
And there may actually be some things that your mom is going, I'm surprised, as your grandmother ages backwards, right? And as she comes back as her youth, and your mom goes, I'm surprised. You're like, I'm not. I saw it in the but
No,
the experience is going to be amazing. Oh, thank you so much for sharing, for being so open with us and our Night In Presents family. I know they're going to enjoy this playback. And thank you. They're going to enjoy getting to know you better, sis. And I'm going to make sure that in this video, before we close credits, that they're aware of how to get in touch with you. They're aware of how to follow you for that project when it drops. I know they're heavily anticipating that. I am. So tell us a little bit about the list of things that you're working on right now, things you have in the fire.
So the new book we've already talked about, As Is the Sky. I am wanting to focus more on my podcast because I started, I think, about 2 years ago, and it's been sporadic. So I want to really give it focus, especially in harmony with the new book when it's complete. So I want to start doing interviews and more live readings and streaming. So that is going to go on. I am revamping my website to make it more focused on only my books. I've been dabbling in a lot of different things. So I want to get all of these things in focus and lined up together. I'm doing t-shirts, making t-shirts. I got a new t-shirt shop that
Merchandise.
yeah, so I want to get all my Just Spawn things plus a lot of novelty gifts and things. So I'm trying to really get into that. And hopefully some live readings and to get one of my 30 something manuscripts to publication this year. So I have one children's book, a
Beautiful.
picture book. That's what yeah, like young reader, I want to get that as my first legitimate children's publication.
Awesome. What an
Lots to
amazing
do.
lineup for the year. What an
Lots to
amazing
do.
lineup.
Lots to do,
Yes.
definitely.
So, sis, am I right? Did you just rebrand?
I did. I did. I knew that on each of my social media accounts, it was saying something different. They all look different. And I said, if I want to make this my career, and it needs to be cohesive. So whether it's Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or my website, the pocket, I want all of them to have the same face, you know,
Yeah.
what in different Just Vaughn styles is the clothing and the t-shirts and the novelty gifts, Just Vaughn Writes. And what is my last one? Oh, those are the only two I'm working with. I deleted another one. So it's Just Vaughn Writes and Just Vaughn Styles. That's
So
it.
unification of the brand. I love it.
Yes,
I love
yes.
it.
So ooh,
Thank
a
you
lot
so
to
much
do.
for sharing. Yeah. And we're going to let you get back to it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
sis.
Good to see you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This has been so cathartic. How would you get cathartic? I can't even get the cathartic. Thank you.
Cathartic.
I can't even
It's one of my
I can't
favorite
even get the
words.
word out.
Thank you so much for
But
sharing your
definitely.
jewelry box, as the article brought out.
That's
And
beautiful. Oh, I'm
thank
gonna look
you.
that up. That's beautiful. That is
And
beautiful.
wasn't that beautiful? And thank you, A Night in Presents family, for joining this podcast. We'll see
Thank
you at the
you.
next episode.
All right. See you. Thank you, everybody.
Living for weekends, wishing I could take a break from this world. Running on a hamster wheel, but searching for something I can't feel. I just wanna